When we were children, we learned that God is love. And I've spent my entire adult life trying to figure out what love is. How about you? There are a couple conclusions that can be drawn, I suppose. And there have been, along the way, some illuminating insights from others. Most recently, in couples therapy, I was introduced to the love languages and discovered that mine differed from the language of the one I loved. So much so that there was no communicating my love to this person in a language that was understandable. My mother, who almost married the wrong man, or almost married the other guy, used to say to me when I would be in the throes of infatuation, she would say, the heart has to have an object. And at a certain point along that path, she also said to me, you're just in love with love. And I know that's familiar to many. Others have heard the same. Okay, so let's backtrack a little bit. If the heart has to have an object, then is love about objectifying feelings? Well, I got married once. And on my wedding day, my elder brother, who had pretty much demanded a spot on my wedding ceremony, courtesy the request of my mother, because the priest I had selected, or I should say the officiant that I had selected, was my beloved counselor and friend, the late Father Mike Annis, who was an Episcopal priest. Did I already say that? That didn't sit well with my mother, who was not an Episcopal. And so I think in her mind, having my brother speak would sort of normalize for her or make legitimate my marriage ceremony. And I remember distinctly how I felt about that and how I reacted to that, and what happened. What happened was my brother did speak at my ceremony, and Father Mike, because he was gracious, allowed my elder brother to speak for the dominant portion of the ceremony. When I listened to the recording afterwards of his portion, my brother's, I counted the pronoun I think 30 times. I'd have to go back and check. But in that ceremony, his thesis was love is not a feeling, love is an act of the will, which was a legitimate point, it is. Love is an act. Well, I certainly must have taken that to heart because I guess love and expressing it from my point of view thereafter became an act. I thought that if you give of yourself, you do things for another person. You provide practical helps. You give of your time and your money. Then that person will feel the love coming from you, and bingo, you'll get what you not so secretly seek, which is love in return. Well, this was borne out in my life at a certain point too, prior to my marriage. I had met a young man, who was not someone that I would have been attracted to. In fact, at the time I met him, I wasn't. But over time, it was his actions toward me. They were consistently supportive, ready, able, willing, generous. And at a certain point, I remember being so grateful, so incredibly grateful, that suddenly I wanted to give to him in the form of affection. Affection. I became attracted to him physically because of what he had done so willingly for me. In the area of my life at the time, which was the most needful, I had just begun my teaching career in the public schools. I had a marching band program that I willingly accepted. Wow, who does that with no background? Well, that was what I did. But he helped me in that regard so much that I fell in love with him. So, as far as I was concerned, for most of my life, love was an act. My love language was to do for the other person in every way conceivable. And I have come to learn painfully that just because you may feel that love is an act and you express your love by doing things for someone else, you cannot expect your love language to be returned to you. You cannot expect to be loved just because you love. In fact, most recently I've had to face the harsh reality that the more I do, the more I push the other person away. That's pretty painful. And I don't say that with any degree of indulgence. It just is painful. Psychologically, emotionally. Okay, aren't we happy today? But I also have realized today that the heart does have to have an object. Furthermore, if your heart has an object, and that object is not a person, then you cannot love effectively or in a healthy way. What if your heart has an object and that object is yourself? Maybe you are consumed by comforting yourself and having your own needs met. Well, that is your object. Your heart is fixated on your own needs. So how can you give of yourself? Here's the paradox, though. Sometimes part of our need matrix is to give to somebody else. We need to help other people, or we need to solve somebody else's problems. It gives us personal satisfaction. So we're really feeding our own needs by doing for someone else. In the end, we're just doing for ourselves. Also, we might have our heart fixed on another object other than ourselves. Perhaps our object is a process, a substance. If we have an addiction on any level, to any degree, perhaps that prevents us from loving because we can't really get past feeding that fixation toward being even mindful or aware of anyone else's distinct set of needs and wants. So if the heart must have an object, okay then, yes it must, but maybe our hearts already have objects and That's why we struggle loving another person effectively. We're encouraged these days by the self-help gurus and by the, counselors and therapists to love ourselves first. And that implies that we don't want to sacrifice ourselves for the needs of somebody else, that we should first demonstrate self-care so that we are not walking into any relationship in a deprived state. If we're already deprived and we aren't caring for ourselves in a healthy manner, well, maybe we'll become energy hijackers, and maybe we will take the other person's energy away from them until there's no energy left for anything to come back to us. My mother loved sacrificially. She did not practice self-love. She forsook her own health for the needs of the family. And her life came to an end probably a good 20 years before it might have. And 20 years is a long time to forfeit time with your progeny, your grandchildren, if you have them. So the word of warning would be, yes, love self. Don't indulge self, but love self. Be mindful of the signals other people are sending. Go where the needs are greatest. Comfort yourself in loss in a healthy way. And love your Creator, because your Creator is capable of loving you more completely than even your most earnest imagination.